Hi, I'm Joseph Ruvens of the Breda University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, and I'm a professor of organizational behavior, especially for students in hospitality management. And this will be a cross-cultural lecture, and we start with another worldview. Now, when you look at this map of the world, most of you may find this odd, because most of you are used to having this map the other way around. And the reason is that the people who made this map, or made the first maps, were from Western Europe. I think it was either the Netherlands or Britain, but they made the map and they put themselves in the center of the world. Just like most nations put themselves in the center of the world. And I think part of the cross-cultural challenges come from that fact. Now, what I will show you first is that there are three perspectives to look at different cultures. And one perspective is quite famous. That's the one we call the day perspective. The day perspective is when we look at another culture as them, you know, the Japanese, the French, and us, the Dutch, the Germans, the Americans. Then you have a perspective called the we perspective. And the we perspective is where you actually make an effort to live like the locals. I can give you an example. I've been a student in the US, in France, in Bologna, and now I am working in the Netherlands, even when I come from Belgium, so from a different culture. But each time when I've been in a culture, I have decided to join the local festivities, the local foods, a lot of the local behavior, and then you enter the we perspective. Now the richness of the we perspective is that you start to see new things, things you didn't see before. For example, in the Netherlands, people have a tendency to be more direct or upfront than people in Belgium. It's changing, but that's what's going on. Now, what did I learn from the Dutch? For example, that when I was sitting in a meeting and I was being quiet, local people consider this almost uninterested. They would prefer me to come up with suggestions. They would also prefer me to say what my truth was. For example, if I disagreed with something, I could just openly disagree with it, rather than the standard Belgian way where you try not to disagree but go around it. So I learned this more direct approach, and what was interesting is I could import this approach also in my relationships with my Belgian friends and relatives. I had to do it maybe more subtly, but I could import directness. And the only way I could have learned directness is by doing it, by living it with the culture. Just like, for example, when I was a student in the United States, I learned that it was okay to fail. It was okay to try out new and weird and different things. And if it didn't work out, people didn't find it a big problem. They said, great, you tried it. It was very different from my culture, at least 1980s Flanders or Belgium, where if something didn't work out, it seemed to be almost like a blame. Now I realize I am giving some stereotypical comments. They may have changed, but the point is, see if you can go into the we perspective rather than the they perspective. Also, the they perspective is very bizarre, because if I say something like the French, what do I mean? Which picture do I have in my head? Do I have this kind of silly picture of a man wearing a beret and holding his baguette under him and drinking wine? Is that my image? Or do I have an image of a young, hardworking female executive in Paris? Or do I have an image of a farmer in the south of France? And even that, it's always about specific people. And the danger with the day perspective is that you start to live in this illusionary world of a whole group being something. They are like this or they are like that, which of course scientifically makes absolutely no sense. There's a day perspective, which most of us do, the we perspective. And then finally, self-reflexivity. And I would say that perspective is similar to the we perspective, a little bit different, but it basically says when you enter a different culture, you have the chance to evaluate your own culture. You can go back home and say, wait a minute, in my country, shops are closed on a Sunday. And you can ask yourself, is that useful? And the answer may be yes. You may say, yes, I'm glad that there is a day of inactivity in my country so that you can sort of ease down and be quiet. Or you could tell yourself, well, it's odd that we close on Sunday because it's a religious day for the Christian community. It's not so for the Jewish community or non-religious communities. So you could say we should just, keep things open. So self-reflexivity is the skill of taking the wealth of another culture and thinking what that means for you. Now, this is for my students. I will give you a link on the video of HSBC Bank and also on the Peace Corps. And there they talk about things that you should and should not do in another culture. For example, in certain cultures, it's impolite to give something to someone with your left hand. You should always use your right hand. Now, those are little things you should know, or you can at least read about in guidebooks about a culture. Now, I've talked a lot about culture, but I haven't defined it really. Now, you could say that it's a set of basic assumptions that offer shared solutions to universal issues that have evolved over time, and they're handed down from one generation to the next. Now, simply put, the human experience is quite similar for everyone in the world. Whether you're born in Syria, in Belgium, in Japan, all of us have dreams and goals. All of us want family relations, want a job, want peace and harmony. Those are all things we want as humans, but we deal with it differently. So a specific issue, universal issue, could be food. Well, for some people, food means, for example, Spain is it's something that you do between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, and it involves a cooked meal with maybe rice, olives, and some meats and drinks with it. And in another culture, for example, the Netherlands, lunch may mean something that you do between 12 and 1:30, and that involves a sandwich with cheese, for example. Another issue could be relationships. In certain cultures, it is only acceptable to have a marriage between people of different sexes. But there are cultures where it's fine for a marriage between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. So it is again a shared solution of a specific group to a universal issue. How do we deal with those universal issues? And most of you may remember Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, and I go into that in another lecture, but I just want to point out that all those needs are human needs. There is no one on earth who does not have those needs when you're human. the way we fill it out, the way, for example, we deal with esteem needs, may be very different in Pakistan than it is, for example, in the Netherlands, where an esteem need could be that you get an individual award and feel extremely proud of an individual award. Whereas in Pakistan, you may only feel proud when the award was for a group. If it was individual, you may even feel a bit embarrassed vis-a-vis the other people. So we all have esteem needs, but how we fill them out may be different, just like all the other needs. And I'm not sure if you've seen the movie. I was born in 1968, so in the 90s I was mesmerized by a movie called The Matrix, and I really invite you to go there. And the essence of The Matrix is that human beings live in some sort of artificial womb, and inside that we have these connections to our brain, and there a virtual world is created. It happened to be New York City in the late 1980s. Well, culture is this virtual world. Culture is not something that is inherited. It's not something that is genetic. We don't start talking a specific language and behaving a specific way because we happen to be born in Amsterdam rather than in Kyoto or in Buenos Aires. No, it's something that you learn, and we forget that it's just that. It's something that you learned and that you may as well unlearn. And by the way, it's also not the truth. It's not because our culture worships a specific God in a specific way that that's normal or regular or correct. It's just what we happen to do. Now,